Welcome to the Familypreneur Podcast, where we talk about family, generational wealth, and the inner life of entrepreneurship.
I'm your host, Alex Lau,
And I'm Daniel Lauritsen.
and this is today's conversation. So, Daniel Lauritsen, my friend.
Hey.
Hey, well, this is our first ever podcast of the Familypreneur Podcast. I tend to think that we don't really know what we're doing, but we're just we're just gonna have a conversation around familypreneurship, or however you want to call it. Now, I guess what makes me and I guess everybody listening curious is we know what family is and we know what an entrepreneur is, but combining the two into this new sexy word of familypreneur, um, you came up with the word, you came up with the whole concept, and I think I'm curious to unpack what it means. We're going to spend the next, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes really unpacking what that means. Obviously, over the years, we have spoken we've spent so much time speaking about these concepts and everything. Over the years, I've got a glimpse of, what's in your head, but,
Yeah.
I think now is the time for us to take the opportunity for you to give us the whole shebang and your vision. And what do you actually want this podcast or your community, potential community, to outwork this whole idea of familypreneurship? That's the word that I'm coining at the moment. All right. So talk to us.
Yeah. So, funnily enough, it was actually my dad that came up with the word. He's definitely the creative one. So, yeah, we're having a conversation about kind of all of the things that I believe and passionate about and all of that kind of stuff. And he came up with the word familypreneurship, and it's just kind of stuck with me. It just hasn't left. But probably where it came from originally is I grew up in a pastor's family, so I was a pastor's kid.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's true. So we grew up in a town called Dunedin in New Zealand. And so Dad was a pastor, and we served a very low socioeconomic area. We did not have a lot of money, and the church certainly couldn't afford to pay my dad a lot of money. And so we struggled. We struggled a lot as a family, especially in the early years. And so we found, I guess for us, as a child, it felt like we were constantly trading off the value of mission versus the pursuit of money. And it felt like you had to make a choice in our family. It was very much like you're either pursuing mission or you're pursuing money, but you can't pursue both. You've got to
You can't have
pursue.
both.
Yeah, you got to pursue one or the other. And so that was very much our family for the first probably maybe 10 to 12 years of my formative years. And so that became a real kind of like foundational, I guess, this sense of like struggling, but feeling like you're doing something meaningful. And I still remember a season where my dad didn't even get paid by the church, and I was freaking out trying to work out how we were going to survive and how we were going to eat. And
how old were you?
At that time, I would have been about 10. I would have been around 9, 10 years old.
And at the age of 10, you were already freaking out about survival, because usually, like, wouldn't you be in the mindset of, oh, mom and dad's just going to figure it out? Like, you were like at the age of 10, like, what were your mindsets then?
I don't know. I think it's my parents have always been what Christians called faith-filled people, in the sense of
Spirit-led.
they basically they took big risks and trusted God was kind of the best way to explain what that means. And I think that when you grow up as a child, you intuitively know that there's more going on. Like your parents can show, oh, things are okay, we're going to be all good and everything's okay. But you intuitively know that this is hard work. And so one of the other things as well was that the way that we survived as a family was Dad would buy houses, do them up and sell them. So every about 12 to 18 months, we would be constantly moving because we would
Wow.
be finding a new property. We would
Yeah.
be moving in, we'd be doing renovations, we'd be living in the property while we're doing renovations. And so you kind of think, why are we doing this? Why are we moving all the time? Why are we moving to a new house? And you kind of know, well, we need it for the money. Like that's kind of
Hmm.
the basis of it.
So that was
So
his version of tent making.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that was his way of. The best way to describe my dad is very much a trader. He loves to
Mm.
buy and sell things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's been very good at that over the years. But we didn't do it to build wealth. We did it
Mm.
for income.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was the way that we kind of
Yeah.
got by. So
And
so as a
that's
10-year-old, you kind of know this is hard. This is hard work. And so when my parents sat me down and said, we are taking a faith step and we're not
mm,
going to get paid by the church, nobody's going to know. This is just going to stay between us and the family. At the time, I think my parents felt like they were doing the right thing
mm,
by communicating it that way. It actually, weirdly enough, it actually became a slightly traumatic
yeah.
experience
Yeah.
for me, a 10-year-old. And my parents always tell me that I broke down crying, asking, what are we gonna eat? You know, like how are we going to survive? Like
Yeah.
this makes no sense. So
Wow.
it was a season of,
Wow. So
uh,
parents, be careful what you tell your kids. And yeah, we all want that like sit down family meeting moment where we talk about important stuff. But you know what? Yeah, just be mindful what you communicate to your kids.
well, it's the transparency. Like I think they felt like they were being transparent and they wanted us to
Mm,
feel like they were part of what was
mm,
going on. And so that totally made sense.
yeah.
I think though that what it also did for a young child was your it's not that it created a scarcity mindset, but you become aware of scarcity
Yeah. Yeah.
at a very young age. And I
Mm,
think that was for us, and all of us are like, I think everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have got that experience that they
mm,
recognize scarcity, and that's what drives them for the
mm,
pursuit of whether that be business or wealth or resources and all of that kind of stuff. I think for me, that was I can pinpoint the moment where became a big deal for
mm,
me in
mm,
my formative years. And so for me, that was where I kind of come from, that place of going, it felt like a choice. It was either mission, as in serving people, because our church was a
mm.
great church, serving a great community. We did incredible things. We served a beautiful city.
Yeah.
It was great. Like the meaning was really, really high,
I
but
wouldn't.
the money was
I
very,
wouldn't
very
call it. I wouldn't call any church a great church where they're not paying their pastor though.
yeah, but you have to understand as well that where we lived was the second lowest socioeconomic
Yeah,
area of New
I
Zealand. So
understand.
the average wage of the person in our church was government benefits. And so
Mm,
um,
yeah,
we did have some business people in the church, but we weren't in a wealthy area. And so in a way it was a sacrifice to serve
yeah,
that
like a mission,
community.
like a mission work, missional work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what Dad felt God called him to do, and so
Mm,
cool, like we
yeah,
followed him,
yeah.
and I don't regret any of it, right? Like I
Mm,
don't.
yeah, of course.
I loved my
Yeah,
growing
it's
up in
part of your
Dunedin.
story.
Well, yeah, it was
Yeah,
and the schools were great, the lifestyle was great. Like it was cold in Dunedin, but it was a great
yeah.
lifestyle, and I wouldn't change that for anything. But I think that like I said before, the one thing that I think really formed in me when I was very young was this having to decide between money and mission. And so
Mm,
it wasn't until in my teenage years that my dad had a bit more of a revelation of creating wealth. So early on it was trading properties to create income.
mm,
And then once we're in my teenage years, he started to kind of more have a revelation or an understanding of, oh, I can actually create wealth doing this, right? And
yeah.
so his mindset shift. So he had quite a
Wow.
big mindset shift that you could have
Yeah.
money and mission. Um,
What do you think happened to him? Was it just an aha moment from God, or like, do you know anything about that?
yeah, I have spoken to him about it. It escapes me right now, but there was a moment where he had a bit of an aha moment of like
Mm,
going, oh, I can do this. I think as well, Dad grew up he didn't have a great relationship with his dad. And so when you don't have a great relationship with your dad, you can have, you don't get taught the things, that a dad should teach you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't have
Yeah.
that. And so I think for him, it was more confidence
Mm.
in it. And I think it was realizing, especially after we'd done a few houses and we'd
Mm.
actually done quite well, I think there was just a confidence that really built in
Mm.
him and going, oh,
Yeah.
actually, this isn't just something I need to do for an income. This is actually
Yeah.
something we can do to build wealth. There is a more of a story to it that I'd have to
Mm.
ask him about. But
Well,
but yeah,
well,
it was.
he should be our first podcast guest. Podcast
Yeah.
guest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's kind of where he started to have that in my teenage years, a bit of an understanding of money is a good thing. It's, like building wealth and so he did really well through my teenage years, and then we got into the GFC, and being in
Wow.
New Zealand got hit really, really hard.
Wow.
And it was about that time as well that the GFC happened, plus
Mm.
we went through a major family transition in terms of he was finishing up at the church that he was at and moving. And so unfortunately, that was kind of season where he had to sell some of the properties, but you had to sell the properties at kind of the
A
bottom of the
loss.
market. So
Yeah.
we ended up losing quite a bit of money in
Was
that.
he the classic case of like leveraging too much and then the market crash and then all of that stuff?
No, not necessarily. I think it was more that we probably had a lot of that equity in our home, like the house
Mm.
that we lived in. And so when the market dropped off, and then
Yeah.
we had to move away from where we were living
Mm.
at the time in Dunedin, you could keep it as an investment property, but that's not always the best solution for every property. So then you end up having to sell it, and then that's where you kind of end up losing something. So he didn't go like completely wrong. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a bankruptcy or anything
Yeah.
like that. It was just a significant like pullback on
Sure.
the
Sure.
equity he'd created over
Yeah.
the years.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and that was about the time that we separately, but we moved across to Australia, and we're kind of
Mm.
starting again. And I
Mm.
think that's when I really started to recognize, we've always been passionate about mission and about serving others and being a positive light to the world.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think I in that season I recognized, man, it is so hard to be a blessing to others when you've got no money, when you're
Mm.
broke. And that's a very real thing. And I don't think we
It
talk
is.
about that very much in the church. I think in the
Yeah.
church we're very much like, oh, we're supposed to be poor.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be rich and wealthy and all of that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
get where they're coming from in terms of like, that being the pursuit of your life.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Yeah.
think at the same time, if you want to be a great blessing to other people,
Mm.
you know, the Bible's filled with
Yeah.
stories of
It's
wealthy people who were able to
yeah.
bless others because God
Yeah. Well,
blessed
I mean, yeah. Don't get me started on this kind of stuff, right? But it is much more scalable and sustainable when you have a lot of resources to actually, obviously we do not worship money, and everything comes from God. But at the same time, money does make the world go around, and
them.
when you possess resources. I tend to want to call it resources
Mhm.
overflow of resources. The kind of impact and influence that you can bring to the world and the kind of help that you can bring to the world can be much more scalable and sustainable. So yeah, I'm all in that camp, and I'm here. I hear you totally in terms of this whole tension especially in the evangelical Christian world, I guess, this whole tension between mission and money. I still remember reading a book talking about the spirit of mammon, um,
Mhm.
uh, and where the author breaks it down. The spirit of mammon actually has two sides. One is obviously the prosperity side, when you worship money and go, God's going to bless you and, all that stuff that we hear a lot, especially in, TV evangelism or parts of America. But the other side of mammon is actually poverty, the poverty
Mm.
mindset, right? Where, there's, if you want to, if you, and in a way that it is also a lie, like if you want to go all out with God, you cannot have any possession. You need to just empty yourself and live the most simplest life, the modest life, become a monk, and strip yourself on any possession, and that's how you go all out to God, right? And just totally depend on God. And that, in a way, I would go so far and say is also sort of a lie, um, where the devil is pushing you towards poverty, where you're always scared, you have this scarcity mindset, you're always fearful of what's to come and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
And I
we
I
need
would
to.
say that's the majority. Like, I would say that, yeah, there are some people who, well, let me rephrase that. I feel like the reason some people pursue wealth and money is usually a scarcity mindset. You know,
Mm,
it's,
yeah.
and I know that's been my weakness because of
Mm,
that experience when I was a kid. I'm often motivated to increase my resources because I'm fearful of
yeah.
losing it all and being broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes from
Mm,
that fear that I had as a child. And
mm,
so I feel like there's a lot of people that are motivated
mm,
by scarcity,
yeah.
and what it ends up getting to a point where, okay, you end up having enough, but then it almost becomes meaningless, and
Yeah.
that's because you're not being motivated by vision of the
Mm,
positive that you can
mm,
do with resources. You're doing it
yeah.
based out of fear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that, yeah, there's a
It's
lot
the
of people.
survive
Yeah,
and thrive thing that we talk about, right? Like, yeah, most people, I do agree with you. Most people chase money because they want to survive, right? There is a survival mechanism. And even if you're in the super rich, even if you're in the billions, you start going like, oh, this guy's making 200 billion and I'm only doing two, I'm
mm,
not surviving in this world of, billionaires. And, then they
definitely.
end up chasing more and more and more, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that definitely that comparison kind of, perspective. So, yeah, I think so that's kind of where the I guess the heart of it came from.
Yeah.
I think the other side of it is that I feel that God's really placed a passion in me for family, and I think I've actually had that from a very young age without being able to articulate it. But
Mm,
I've always really wanted a family, and
mm,
that's been always been a really important thing for me
mm,
as I have grown up. And I think as I've grown up and watched our society go
mm-hmm.
through all sorts of challenges
Yep.
and difficulties in this season,
Mm,
in my opinion,
mm,
I feel like a lot of these problems are due to the breakdown of the family. And I
mm,
don't mean that just in the sense of the family unit, which is
mm,
the nuclear family, so just
mm,
mum, dad, and the kids. I
yeah.
mean that from a multi-generational family perspective about
Mm,
a family working together multi-generationally to create something bigger than ourselves. We have shifted to a much more individualistic worldview,
yep,
where we're
absolutely.
all trying to use the family as a platform for our own vision and our own dreams, rather than being a part of a vision and a family
Yeah.
and working together. So I feel like that breakdown has caused significant challenges in our society,
Yep.
and so I think as I've grown, I've noticed that because family is a value for me, I'm like, well, what happens when we don't have family? And I can see so
Mm,
many of the challenges, especially between when there's breakdown of relationship between parents and kids, and the breakdown of marriages that end in divorce, the impact on that on the kids, not just from a relational perspective and an emotional perspective, but also from a financial perspective. Like,
mm,
divorce smashes people's, wealth, right? It causes real
yeah.
problems.
So can you unpack that just a little bit more for us? Whenever we think about the concept of family, we think about our own family unit. So, I'm happily married with three kids. And whenever the topic comes up of, how's your family doing? And then, we tend to be like inward focused, right? Our kids are
Mhm.
doing this and our house is this. And then we're planning on buying this, buying that, and going on these holidays and, just, be happy together as a family, right? Or,
Yeah.
the further along the way we go, okay, well, we really want our kids to become this and that's their future trajectory so that they can go and have their own life and whatnot, right? So, but to me, it's very inward focused. I'll be interested to discuss this, like in your view, like if I can have the agency to use this word social responsibility, and obviously for those of you guys who are listening already, like you could already smell that this is going to be quite a faith or a Christian faith driven or the Christian faith has a lot to do with this
Mm.
podcast and this community and whatnot, right? So I'm just trying to use the word social responsibility. What do you think? Why God created the family in terms of advancing society, or in the Christianese word, advancing His kingdom, or how do you think about that, right? So your family and my family, what roles do we have to play in society? How do we contribute to society or make this world a better place as a family unit?
Mm.
Yeah, what's your opinion
Yeah,
on that?
it's
Yeah.
a good question. So the way that I think about it is, I go back to the promise that God made to Abraham, in the Old Testament, where he said, called out Abraham, go to a new land. He didn't have any kids, but he said, I'm going to make the descendants, look at
Mm,
the stars, look at the
mm,
sand. That's the amount of descendants you're going to be. I'm going to make you into a great nation. The way that I see the multi-generational family is basically becoming, because in that time, what God wanted was to have a nation that would be a representative of His values,
mm,
that would then be a blessing to all of the other nations, that the other nations would look at Israel and be like, wow, that God's really got his hand. God's really got His hand on this nation,
yeah.
and they are being loving and kind, and to all, and everyone's being blessed by it. Right? That didn't end up happening, but that was the intent. That was the kind of heart of it. And I think in the same way, I feel like that's what God's asking us to do in our families. He's asking us to create pillar families in our community that can be a flagship,
Mm,
if you like,
yeah.
of Christ and of God in our communities, where people can not see us as um, you know famous and all of that kind of stuff, but
Mm,
more about the intent is to point people towards God, and show that
mm,
living a life in relationship with Jesus and
mm,
a relationship with God, what the benefits of doing life that way and
yeah.
holding to those values. So I think for me, I think about the multi-generational family as building a generational influence in our worlds, in our societies, in our cultures, in our communities.
Mm,
That does It's not just about us; it's about the impact
yeah.
that we have intergenerationally.
Okay, so maybe on a more practical note, right? So, um, in Australia, which is the context that we were in, I live in Melbourne. You live in New South Wales, in the beautiful Port Macquarie of all places. Now, in our country, we have this whole big talking point around population growth, right?
Mhm.
But the population growth doesn't come from us having more kids, or us starting families like us as a population Australians.
Mm.
um, yes, we have got a population growth outlook, but it's all coming from migration, right?
Yeah.
And the issues and the problems for that is, property prices are being jacked up because to try and the narrative once again is to
Mhm.
facilitate the incoming population. That's why we need to build more, and then we when you build more, you have more transactions, and then and then property prices go up to a point that most middle class families are struggling to afford,
Yeah.
at least in the major cities, right? Again, this is not a new problem. Many countries experience this, right? Now,
Mhm.
in the lens of what we're trying to communicate in this healthy families or familypreneurs and whatnot. Me and you in the car a couple of days ago, we were talking about, why don't we um, incentivize people to actually have more kids, right? So that the population growth actually come from within. But with that, we need family systems and healthy families to support all of that. Now, what's
Yeah.
your view on all this? On a more practical sense, I guess my question behind the question is, this whole concept of generational wealth, building healthy families, or this concept of familypreneur, why does it matter to the world? And if
Mhm.
people do it this way, or if we reorder our lives around, some of us, this whole concept of familypreneur, uh, what would the world look like?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing we have to actually recognize is that we are living in the benefit of the generations that have gone before us,
Yep,
and I think we don't give enough credit to that. I
yep,
don't
we're
think we give
stepping on
enough.
their shoulders. Yep,
Yeah,
that's
we
right.
don't
Yeah,
we don't give enough credit to the fact that we live in a Western society
Mm,
founded on, in what I believe, Christian values, so
mm,
so a lot of these societies, now that's not to say that there haven't been problems and there
yeah, of
haven't
course.
been
Yeah,
issues in the application of those values. There's some definite truth to that.
yeah,
However, the values are still there. So I think we live in a free society as a result of the generations that have gone before us. I
mm,
think what I'm concerned about is that we no longer think about the generations that go after us. Previous generations, they were pioneers, but the reason that they were pioneers is they wanted to create a greater life for their kids and their
yeah,
grandkids,
yeah,
and they thought
yeah,
generationally.
yeah. They
It
always have
was
the future in mind, right? Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
yeah.
It wasn't until maybe the 50s after
Mm.
World War II where there was the big um,
Baby
kind of
boomers.
economic kind of
Yeah,
boom post World War
yeah,
II
yeah.
that we started to create suburbs, where
Yes. Yeah.
kids would leave mum and dad, they would go to the suburbs, they would have their
Mm,
white picket fence, and that
mm,
became the American dream and the Australian dream. And so there was a shift away from the multi-generational family to
mm,
a nuclear family
mm,
through the 50s and 60s, and then over time it's become more and more individualistic. And I
mm.
think because of that, we've stopped thinking generationally. We've stopped thinking about the future. And I don't know about you, but to
Yeah,
me, it feels like since that time, since we've become more and more individualistic, since we've
yeah,
become more and more about ourselves rather
yeah,
than our family and the generations, we
yeah.
are making very short-term decisions
Yes.
that might have a great,
Yeah,
impact for us now, but has
yeah.
terrible impacts for our children.
Wow.
Whether we're talking about the debt and our economic,
Yeah,
the government debt
yeah,
that's being built up, we're basically spending money and asking our kids to foot the bill.
yeah.
There's so many decisions that we're making right now that are just terrible decisions for the
Mm,
generations that are after us. And that's why I get really frustrated when
mm,
people are like, "Oh, don't leave any money to your kids."
mm.
And I'm like, "Well, that
Yep,
attitude
exactly.
is causing these problems
Why
for."
do you why do you intentionally set up your kids to have to start again?
Yeah.
And that's just mind-boggling to me. Like again, I think society and mindsets are being shifted at the moment, well,
Mhm.
largely because of the affordability issue. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up in a society where it is the norm that your grandparents and parents would you stay in the same house, for a very long time. Well, again, largely because of the affordability issues, but also
Mhm.
what's that conditioning is this whole idea of we're in this together, we're a mini patriarchic, set up, right? So we're in this together and we're going to ride this thing out together, or our lives are forever connected. That's so
Mhm.
that not that it doesn't have its problems, but that is the values that is being passed down right now in Australia, in America. I think the narrative probably back 10, 15 years ago was, okay, well, once our kids hit 18 or 21, they're on their own, right? The parents would actually consider it an achievement or a win where our kids have moved out of home, right? So they'd be like big relief, they're now finally moved out of home. We can go and enjoy our lives in retirements and whatnot. Now they would just go and start a new life and reset, basically, right?
Mhm.
And to me, that is such a foreign concept for me to. Even though I've lived in Australia, in the Western, so even in Hong Kong, I grew up in a Western society. I've been in Australia for more than 20 years, so I'm a bit of a hybrid. I understand their thinking, but that mindset is so foreign to me. Why are we setting our kids up so that they can go ahead and restart again, where there's no help, no um, no linkage whatsoever, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's definitely
So,
shaped by what you're describing. Yeah,
yeah, totally. And I think the problem has been is that we blame the children. We
yeah,
blame the kids because in that period, right, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, there's like, I think there's movies like Failure to Launch, right, which is
mm,
the movie about a 30-year-old guy
mm,
who's still living at home with his mum, right?
yeah,
And what we do is we blame the child for still living at home,
mm,
and there's a
exactly.
linkage of laziness,
Yeah, that's
of
right.
a sense of, entitlement,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
there's all these negative things attached to the
Yeah,
child. Whereas
yeah,
I look at it and I go, well, hang on a minute. What did the parent do?
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like why,
Exactly.
like
What like
if you like if you're a business person, why can't you bring your child into your business world? Why can't
that's
you
right.
disciple your child or train your child
Yeah.
into this type of world? If they've
Yeah.
grown up and they're at home and they're lazy, and they're entitled,
Yeah.
that's not a. I don't particularly put a lot of blame on the child. I put that on the
Yeah.
parent because that's
Absolutely.
where the breakdown has
Yeah,
been.
that's the product of your that's the fruit of what you have, what you have produced over 20, 30 years, right? But like even with that, like even with popular Christian culture, right? You have personalities like your Dave Ramsey or your Mark Driscoll or, like those like, one of the things that they always say is, if you're still living with your mum at, when you're 25, or if you're still living in your parents' basement at 25 or something, you're a failure. Like this, yes,
Mm,
I understand. Like, if you're lazy, you don't go out there and produce and all that sort of stuff, and I do totally agree with you. A lot of that is actually the result of bad parenting or
mhm.
unintentional parenting, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But I think this, if I'm able to use the white subculture or white Christian culture of you're a failure or you're a villain if you are still living at your parents' basement, or if you're still under your family's care at a certain age, then you're a failure. Then you have to go out there and try to be a maverick and go and do whatever. Yeah, that again, like that concept is just so foreign to me.
yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
think what's happening is those guys are trying to speak to the person in the basement, right? Like
Yes,
that's
that's
they're
right.
like saying, okay, you're like, yeah, sure, whatever's happened to get you to this point,
Yeah.
whatever, get out and do something about it.
Yeah.
You're not a
Yeah.
victim. You need to take ownership of your life, which I
Yeah.
totally agree with and I
Yeah.
totally understand that. But I
Yeah.
think that that's a symptom, not a cause, right? And I think
Mm,
that's the point that I'm trying to get people to understand and
mm,
why familypreneurship is so important to me.
mm,
You know,
mm,
because people think, oh, like, well, are you saying that we go back to the stage where you build a business and then you pass that business onto your kids and then they have to live within the, and I'm like, no, that's not what I'm actually saying. What I'm
mm,
saying is that you should be creating a big enough world that your
mm.
kids can live within it and pursue their own dreams. Like
Absolutely.
imagine if each family parents, or parents of families created businesses and wealth that actually allowed their kids to pursue their dreams within the framework of the world that they've created.
Mm,
So what if they did want to start a business? You know, what if they did want to become an artist? Now, we still have to teach them the
mm.
values of like, hey,
Yep.
value is not
Yep.
just based on what you want to do. It's actually
Yep.
based on serving other people,
Yep.
right? So
That's right.
there's
Yep.
still like values that we need to teach our children in that.
Mm,
But why not create a world where you can help them become the best version of themselves,
yeah.
and have the businesses and the resources to help them? So I'm not saying that, oh, if you're a accountant, your son has to be an accountant.
Mm,
But what I am saying is that if you are an accountant and you
yeah.
build enough wealth,
Yeah.
then you can help start a new business for your child. You can support them in different things, not to give money away, but as a
Mm,
way to be a resource for your family, as
mm,
opposed to just saying, oh, figure it out by yourself. Now,
yeah.
there's elements of truth to that. Like, I'm not saying that we should just give our kids lots of money and just let
Yeah.
them go at
Yep.
it. But
Yep.
I just think that we could do a much better of
Yeah.
integrating
That's right.
family life
Yeah. Yep.
into multi-generational. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in future episodes, we're going to talk about this whole, three generation curse,
Mm. Yeah.
and have a discussion. Look, we're on a journey together, and we're still trying to figure this stuff out as we go. Obviously, we come from very different backgrounds,
Mm.
um, but in yeah, there is definitely a balance that we want to be able to find,
Yeah.
in order to how much that even if we're building wealth and we have some wealth to start distributing to our kids, they're at a certain age. What does that look like? What kind of human we want to shape them into
Mm.
being, and what kind of money managers we want them to become at a relatively young age, so that for the purpose of keep passing it along, right? So yeah,
Mhm.
in future episodes we're definitely going to explore that. Now, we've talked about your background,
Yeah.
um, where you've come from, your life's experience in terms of what prompted you to uh, creating this concept of familypreneurship. We've talked about, what ticks us, why we're passionate about this, why does it matter, why do we care. Now, I would like to, like, if you're, let's say for let's imagine you're in a cocktail party, and then you're having conversations about this, and then you go, oh, I'm starting this concept or podcast or potentially a community around this concept of familypreneurship, and you have about 60 seconds to explain what you're proposing. What is
Mm.
familypreneurship, and what are you trying to achieve? um, what's your version of that spill?
Basically, what I would be saying is let's put family first in
Mm,
our entrepreneurship.
okay.
I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship, and especially right now, where in Australia we're living at the moment, where life is getting more and more expensive,
Hmm.
especially in the property market. We used to
Yep.
create wealth through property
Yep.
for many
No
years. That's
longer.
becoming harder and harder and harder. And
Yep.
I think a lot of people are kind of hoping that crypto becomes the thing that is going to replace that. But and look, who knows? Maybe. But I think for me, I just see that business is the
Yes.
best tool to create income
100%.
that can
100%.
support long-term wealth for the family.
Yep.
But we
Yep.
don't want to pursue that at the expense of the family.
Yep.
And so for me, it's important to entrepreneurship has been hijacked by hustle culture,
Yes.
in my opinion. And so
Yep.
I
And we're
just
all victims of that.
yeah. So
Yep.
for me, I'm like, well, what if there was a different way? And I do
Yeah.
believe there's a
Absolutely.
different way
Yeah.
because in my line of work, that's
Mm,
literally what I do is helping business people build a business that's not based on hustle culture, that's based
mm,
on family first kind of principles. You can build a fantastic business without buying into hustle culture.
mm,
Yes, there's a season for hustle, but I think we have to recognize that if we build businesses at the expense of family, it all
mm.
falls apart anyway.
Yeah.
And so if we can focus on family first, I think it
Okay.
becomes much more sustainable.
So we're at a cocktail party. We want to try and explain to people what entrepreneurship looks like. Sorry, what
Mm,
familypreneurship looks like. Is basically family first entrepreneurship, right?
yeah,
Now, there's a
yeah,
lot to unpack there.
yeah,
I think the concept of the right kind of entrepreneurship deserves a separate episode, right? But
yeah.
I like to understand when you say family first entrepreneurship, what does family first look like? Is that from a time spend point of view, attention spend point of view? Yeah, what does that look like? So does that mean that we, instead of working like the hustle culture tells us you need to put in 80 hours of work, especially when you're starting out, right?
Mm.
What does that look like in the lens of family first entrepreneurship?
Uh, it's about prioritization.
Mm,
So it's about an order of priorities. I think that's
mm,
kind of the key thing. And that's not to say, well, therefore don't work because your family
yeah.
has to come first. What it is like you have to work for your family. Like
Mm,
you need if you are not providing for your family, there's a problem,
mm,
right?
mm,
Like so there's not it's not like, oh, we're going to build the family at the expense of entrepreneurship or business.
yeah.
But what it is that we need to build it in such a way that it serves our family rather
Yeah.
than our family serving it.
So just on that very quickly, right?
Mm.
Um, And there's a lot of hard, like inner work that you need to do to really be honest to yourself and to discern the intention of your ambition, right?
Mm.
Like, so in what you've just described, would you say someone who's like, I have got this new idea that I think is going to change the world to create a tech product. So and we don't have, I have 3 kids. We are living paycheck to. I work full time currently. We're living sort of paycheck to paycheck because of the mortgage and the car payments and all that sort of stuff. And I send my kids to private school and whatnot. So, but because of my vision of creating this tech product that is going to change the world, I'm going to step out in faith, quit my job, and go and work at this thing, put in 120 hours a day to try and make this work. But
Yeah.
I have no idea how to market this. I have no idea where the revenue is going to come from. But I'm going because God has called me to go and create this tech product to change the world, and I'm going to
Yeah.
leave my family on the line in the name of entrepreneurship and ambition.
Mm.
How would you, yeah, how would you dissect that? Is that like, yeah, in the
Yeah,
lens of family first opportunity? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I I think about it through the lens of this. There's a big difference between faith and faithfulness.
Mm,
I'm never one, like, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the words that entrepreneurs hate to hear is no, right? They hate to hear
yeah,
no, you can't do that, right? Like,
yeah,
that's just not a word in their vocabulary, and that's
yeah.
good.
That's right.
I love that. But the question is more about how. It's not
Mm,
about whether you do something, it's about how you do something. So if you build a tech, you got a tech product,
mm,
awesome. But let's validate it before you just throw everything at it,
that's
because
right.
therefore, yeah, you might be being faithful to the call, but
Mm,
you're not being faithful to your family. And I
mm,
think we need to be real about that. I
mm,
think I think so many of us, myself included, have done
mm.
things
You
at
just
the
jump into
expense
the
of
deep
our
end.
family. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we felt like we were doing the right thing.
yeah,
And
that's
that's
right.
not the, and so did we do the right thing? Sort of.
Yeah.
Yes, we pursued the right thing, but the
That
way
is
we
true
did
to your heart. You
that,
did that the right thing according to your heart, right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, but the unintended consequences of how we did it has made a significant impact. And I think about the faith thing, and I think if we're talking about the Christian world
Mm,
for a
mm,
moment,
mm,
um, the reality is that God called many people throughout the Bible, and often they were not the ones to see the vision come to pass.
yeah, absolutely.
Whereas our culture, especially
Yeah,
in Western, Christianity, we
yeah.
want to see the vision come to pass in our
In
lifetime.
our lifetime, that's right.
And
Yeah,
so it's a
yeah,
very different approach to
absolutely.
business and entrepreneurship and
Yeah,
pioneering. And
yeah.
that's where we put so much energy and effort and drive, because we need to see it happen in our lifetime. It's so important to us that, and
Mm,
I think we have to we have to stop and we have to ask the question, why?
mm,
Why does it need to happen in our lifetime?
mm.
Is it because of the impact you want to make, or is it
Yeah.
actually about you? And
Yes. Yeah.
oftentimes, if we're real and honest,
Yes,
which goes back
absolutely.
to what you were saying about the inner
Yeah,
work, if we're
yeah,
honest with ourselves, most of
yeah.
the time it's about us. It's
Yes.
not about the family.
No.
We can say, "Oh, I'm doing this for my family." No, you're not.
Yeah, yeah.
like,
That's right.
like, there's an element that's true, but there's a
Yeah,
lot that's not. And I think we have to be
yeah,
real about that.
yeah. Well, because again, me and you were in the entrepreneur well, and we consult a lot of entrepreneurs, successful and modest people,
Mm,
entrepreneurs. A lot of them actually um, have all of their life expenses covered already, right?
mm,
Like they can truly and proudly say that I've built a business that can actually look after my family, but they still hustle, they still put in a ridiculous amount of work for growth at all costs, um for what, and when we're really honest to ourselves, most of the time is for our personal ambition. And to your point, right, the result of that is, families break down, your kids don't know you anymore, you're on your fourth marriage, and
mm.
all of that stuff, all of that coming from an ambition, an ambition for self-interest.
Yeah,
um
if it's done poorly,
yeah,
if it's done badly, like, because I think what's really important is to recognize that I don't believe there's anything wrong with ambition.
yeah.
I see ambition is often based
Mm,
on things that God has placed in our hearts,
mm,
to pursue. So it's
yeah.
not so much about what the ambition, it's more
Mm,
about how we pursue the ambition. Are we taking people along the journey with us? Or
mm,
are we sacrificing people along the way with us? And I think that's the point that I think is really important around the
mm,
familypreneurship. It comes back to prioritization. If we
mm,
prioritize our family and say, hey, this is what God's called us as a family to do, but we need to take our family on that journey with us, we make very
mm,
different decisions, because we go, okay, I'm here, but my wife and kids are here.
mm,
I need to slow down a bit so that they
yeah,
can come with me on this
yeah.
journey. Otherwise, you end up blowing up your family, as you say.
That's right. Or how
Uh,
can or how can I create a pathway to bring them along? Well, yes, I'm
yeah.
going to slow down my pace. I'm not going to stop moving, right?
Yes.
Because
Correct.
life is a continuum, and you want to, keep continuing. I'm going to slow down my pace. At the same time, I want to create a pathway to bring or to speed them up slightly, or bring them, to a point where we're more on the same page together. And that in itself is a great challenge for us to um, prioritize or order our entrepreneurship based around family first values.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of things, right?
Mm.
And for those of you who are out there watching or listening to this, as you can tell, we're still trying to figure this stuff out ourselves, right? Um, if we're able to leave one question or a couple of questions for both me and you to ponder, in terms of this family first entrepreneurship or familypreneur, how do we go about reprioritizing our priorities or reordering our priorities so that we build entrepreneurship around families, or we prioritize family? What would be a couple of questions that you would want us to ponder um, until the next time we speak again?
Yeah, so I think that the first question I would ask is, what would it look like if you saw your family as a team?
Mm,
What would that look like if you were building your business, if you're building your life, right? Really what you're doing is you're building your life, and business is it's a small part of your life.
mm,
It can be a significant part, but it's still a part of your life. And so I think the first question I would ask is, if you considered your team as a part of your life, as a part of your business, as a part of that, what would it look like if you treated them as a team? How would you work with them differently? How would you communicate with them? How would you
mm,
teach them and disciple them? Like, what
mm,
would that look like if you were to take a slightly different paradigm as to how they engage? Because especially as men, we segment life. We've got
mm.
our family life, and then we've got our work life, and then we've got our
Yeah,
church life, and then we've got
yeah,
our sports life, right?
yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
if we created an integrated family life and saw our
Mm,
family as a team that was
mm,
building that life, how
mm.
would we do things differently? So that would be
Yeah.
the first question
Okay.
I would ask. The second question I would ask is, what do you actually want to leave behind
Mm,
to your kids at the end of your life? What do you want to leave behind? Now, I'm not saying that you should leave, $1 billion to your kids. That's not
yeah.
what I actually think is more important is, what is the example that you
Mm,
want to leave behind to your kids? Because the example is someone who can manage resources and build wealth. I want to be that example to my kids. I want to teach
mm,
them how to do that. I
yeah.
want to teach them that it's important to provide for your family.
Mm,
And so but the example of that is more
mm,
important. So it's almost like the process or the
mm,
example is more
mm,
important than the result, right?
mm,
They may be the results, but
yeah.
what is the example? What is the process that you want to
Mm,
leave behind for your kids?
mm,
What would that look like for
yeah.
you?
So first question is, if we saw our families as a team,
Hmm.
what does that look like, right? So what if our family is a team, right? And that team, we're building a team to play in the sport of entrepreneurship. That's how I'm
Yeah.
shaping my thinking at the moment. And then secondly, what do you want to leave behind? An exercise that I've done years ago is actually writing your own eulogy at your funeral. What do you want your loved ones to talk, to talk about your life, right? So I think that would be another, what do you want to leave behind? Final question: in light of all of this, what are some of the personal habits or thinking, or how you're building your personal business at the moment? What are some of the practical steps that you have applied, and you're starting to see some fruits? Obviously, you still have a very young family, and you've ventured into a lot of business activities. But I'm curious to know, what are some of, like, in light of all of this, because you've done a lot of soul searching and inner work yourself in order
Mm.
to land all of these thought process. What are some of the personal stuff that you've applied for yourself?
Yeah. So my kids are 1 and 4, so they're very
Yeah,
young and
got a
full
long way
on.
to go. Yeah.
So the answer to that question is, I've been very intentional about our family routines.
Mm,
So for me, the dinner table is really important for us
mm,
in terms of at the end of the day, it's challenging to switch
oh yeah,
off work
oh yeah,
and then go
yeah.
straight onto the
Yeah.
dinner table and trying to be present with your family. It's really
Yeah,
hard.
the kids are not just gonna sit there and wait for dad to come home and tell us about all these great ideas and great things that you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
And
have their own world. They're distracted as well, right? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So like I need to make sure that I'm present there. So the family table, it's all about routines. It's about
Mm,
rhythms of
mm,
family life. I think that's the thing that I've learned over the last couple of years. What are the things that are important in our routine, and
mm,
I need to keep that. So dinner time is really big for us, and then I am the one that does the bedtime routine. So the showers, the bathing, the getting them ready for bed, and then when we're putting them to bed, family prayers,
yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. So those things are I've found to be really, really important. And then one of the other one is using the Christian word Sabbath or a
Mm,
day off
mm,
and making that a family day
yeah.
and being really clear that, hey, during the week, Dad's working really, really hard and I do travel quite a bit for
Mm-hmm,
work.
mm,
But one of the things I try almost religiously is to
mm,
not take up our family day. And so we have, Friday night movies and then Saturdays as a family,
mm,
um, where we are spending time intentionally as a
mm,
family. So for me, it's been about rhythms and routines and making sure that the kids know that this is our rhythm and routine of when dad's present and spending time with us. And so
yeah.
those things are really, really important for us.
Awesome. Mate, is it a very exciting journey that we're venturing into together in building
Um,
this podcast as a starting point, but ultimately we want to start building a community around this whole idea of familypreneur or family first entrepreneurship. There are lots and lots of exciting topics to unpack and sometimes confronting topics to unpack, and is going to be interesting, but I would also use the word risky and dangerous because we have a lot of personal opinions and personal experiences around a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing through what this podcast and community is going to look like for us. Yeah.
I know
So
I'm really excited. I do feel that a lot of what family first entrepreneurship is quite countercultural. And so I agree with you. I think it's also risky in the sense that I think we're going to realize that a lot of what we believe to be true
mm,
may not be true.
absolutely.
And there's a lot of things that we're going to have to work through
Mm,
that maybe our opinions today that
yeah,
may have to change tomorrow. And I think that's the
that's right.
purpose of this journey. And I want
Absolutely.
to really invite people on that journey with us to go,
Yeah.
hey, let's work this out together.
Yeah.
What is it? In the comments or whatever, feel free to challenge
Mm,
us
yeah.
on our thoughts and ideas,
Yeah.
because I think the reality is in my opinion, we're not living a family first
Mm,
lifestyle right now in terms of
yeah.
culture.
Yeah. We're
Individually,
not.
we may be attempting to,
Yes.
but culturally, we're not. And I think that if we can discover a way to do this together,
As a
we could,
collective, as a
as a
collective.
collective,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
we can.
your micro family and micro family, we can only make, we can, the impact is not going to be as
Yeah,
scalable. Whereas, a collective of people who are building family first entrepreneurship coming together, and that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Well, so for those of you who are watching or listening out there, if you're looking for a how-to podcast, like where a bunch of guys have all the answers and you'll become a billionaire by next Friday and have, $5 billion of inheritance to your kids by next Tuesday, this is probably not the podcast for you. But
Okay.
if you're in the business of wrestling together to figure stuff out in our unique ways, and to explore these interesting topics around what's really family first and what's real entrepreneurship and how do we go about building generational wealth where we actually don't live to see through, but how do we go about conditioning our family legacy around making this world a better place? This is the right podcast for you. So we invite you to join us in our journey. But until next time, see you later.